So if I could ask you the first question, which is when did poetry start, and if you can remember maybe the first sort of moment when you felt that what you were doing is poetry and that you are a poet.
I wrote a couple of poems when I was actually in junior school, and they were kind of based closely on poems by Robert Louis Stevenson. And the teacher put one of them up on the wall, so I was very proud of that. I think really it goes back to when I was a teenager, especially. My parents were kind of separated when I was 11, divorced a bit after that, and I kind of never really been able to talk to them. So poetry became a kind of means of expressing myself where I couldn't talk to them. So it was that inspired me most of all into and also there was a competition which was organised by the school, Man on the Moon,
right?
And decided to enter the competition. I must have been about 13, something like that. Won the competition, and I discovered afterwards there was only 2 people in for it. And the other guy had really pissed off the teacher, so I think that's probably why I won it. But that was published in the school magazine, so it was kind of a poem on the wall publication at a very early age, but also that kind of desperate need to express myself, whereas I couldn't do that with my parents at all. Having said that, my mother was big inspiration in terms of giving me poetry books to read, especially one book called New Poetry at the time, which included a lot of British and American poets. So that was inspirational as well.
Do you say, or if at all you feel that there's been a change in the poetry landscape at all?
Yes. I think poetry's become a lot more diverse now. Poets like Eric and Garley Charles. I think there's another one, Abir Amir in Cardiff, both being published by Seren, which is exciting. I think, on the other hand, at that time, poets were writing much more out of their community. And I think we've lost that to an extent in Wales, but I think Red Poets, to be honest, has carried that on. I think there's more of a distinction now unfortunately, between kind of mainstream and the alternative. I think there was a kind of blend between the two. Poets would drift between the two at that time in the 80s. Now it tends to be a bit more distinct.
Right.
Let me think. What else? Something else I wanted to say.
Okay.
No, I can't think what it was.
What about forms? Would you say that the sort of
I think
emphasis and forms have changed?
Yes, I think there's probably a greater diversity of experiment now, on the one hand, but I think there's also a kind of loss to me because music in language is very important.
Yes.
I think there's been a loss of the musicality to a certain extent. Narrative poetry has probably taken over more imagistic poetry, which is not necessarily a bad thing. I think I know what I wanted to say. It was to do with kind of creative writing industry. Now, my friend Robert Minhinnick has said that it's a really bad thing. Creative writing industry is a bad thing, and that it kind of creates manufactured poets. I wouldn't say that. I think it can be inspirational for a lot of poets, but I would say that it's sort of it's a bit limiting.
Right.
It's kind of I think it makes poetry a little bit rarefied, cuts it off from everyday life and the streets, if you like, because these poets come from university and they haven't had a job or they haven't lived so much. They can't draw on that experience.
Okay. Okay, so it's much more now. You'd say that it's sort of like a way to to teach someone how to write poetry rather than rely on the sort of their natural life experiences, and then learning based on that.
Yes, exactly. Yeah. That's right.
You've already mentioned Red Poets a little bit, so tell me a little bit more about kind of exactly what your involvement with the Red Poets and how it came about.
Right. It's good last a long time. Okay. We've been going 27 years. The Red Poets came out of really out of a group called Cymru Goch, who are the Welsh Socialist Party. And initially it was going to be just like a one-off thing, a single magazine booklet or whatever.
Yes.
But we, after the first time, which was actually a complete disaster the launch, because we had the covers of the launch but not the inside.
Yes.
So it could have been a disaster, but we carried on, and it's really developed tremendously. We produced books. We produced a CD. It really has been great, and like the latest issue, the last issue 25 consisted of a lot of, this comes back to the kind of Cameroon connection, consisted of poets from Africa, an article about prison writing in Cameroon. The next one is kind of more to do we haven't got a theme, but there's a lot more kind of ecological poetry. And the one after that, which is almost full as well, which is next year's, is a lot of poems coming out of lockdown.
Okay. So this is about I think in August 2019 edition of Poetry Wales. I read an article that was by you about your process for writing poetry, and you just a quote from
I think it was online, wasn't it?
Yes, it was online.
It must have been online. Yeah. Yes, that's
all poems are journeys without a known destination, but none more so than those which derive from an inspirational moment.
Yeah.
So I'd like to know a little bit more about the sort of your creative process, and if how it may have evolved over the years.
Oh God, that's a tricky one as well, isn't it? I think it's interesting because when I was they were talking, John Gower the other night in the launch of the Three Molars was talking about Ifor ap Glyn. And Ifor ap Glyn being the archetypal writer with a notebook and writing things down. I don't write nothing down.
Right.
Absolutely nothing. So it's all, for me, it's accumulating things, it's drawing things in, it's sensations, it's sights, and I know I'm not a person who says, right, get a notebook and jot or record or anything like that. It's got to build up, and it's got to, and then I think the moments were more perhaps defined in the past, but for me the moments of inspiration now are slightly more nebulous, but they kind of come in shapes, if that makes any sense. If in artistic terms, sculptures, I see them as a sculpture.
Yes.
The poem as a sculpture, and it's just there in the background, and maybe an image or maybe a voice or maybe a word.
Yes.
So it's one particular thing that's kind of started all off.
Okay, so
I don't know whether that's explained.
No, it does. I'm just sort of curious. So, obviously, when you went to Cameroon for the Three Molars, would you have kind of made rough notes, or maybe would you have started the poems there, or when you came? Oh, right, okay.
I wrote most of the poems. Literally 3 o'clock in the morning. Woken up by a cockerel. Not all of them. I think it's about 3 I wrote afterwards. But all the rest of the poems I wrote there. Obviously, I worked on them afterwards, changed them afterwards. Yes. But the essence of them. And I remember writing. Probably people didn't like the book that much, but I wrote a book largely of sonnets. It was something different, really. Yes. And I wrote these sonnets on the train journey coming back from. I worked in Cardiff, going back, returning from Cardiff to Merthyr. And I remember putting on the back of the book that I had written them on the train journeys, and people said, I just didn't believe it, basically, you never did that. But I actually did sit there and write them, during the train journey. And the sonnet just seemed to fit the time of the train journey. I remember one guy, eminent Welsh critic, who just said, don't write sonnets, Mike. But I think some of them worked, hopefully, Okay.
Enjoy forms then? Do you sort of to have written a book of sonnets,
it's not so much forms, it's different ways of writing. I write a lot of haiku, so that I suppose that's a form in a way, but I like writing in open form, spacing the page out, spacing the words out. I've come back to that more recently. I had a book called More Music, which was open form poetry, but I come back to that. Dialect, I like writing in dialect, taking voices. I think because I haven't written stories for quite a while, I think the ideas for the stories and the characters go into the dialect poems more, satire, political satire, I enjoy writing that. So I just like writing in diverse ways, as many diverse ways as I can, and maybe trying to discover other ways of writing as well.
Okay. Right, so on to kind of your love of Cardiff City Football Club, really. Obviously, a lot of poets over the years have been inspired by football, rugby, boxing, horse racing. What is it about sport and kind of poetry, and poets in particular, would you say kind of inspire the connection?
Tricky one, really, isn't it? I think it's probably just, for me, it's like the passion and the involvement and the emotions. And supporting Cardiff City, it's a change of emotions as well. It's depression and elation, and it's a sense of belonging, a sense of identity as well. It's very, very important. Characters as well. I've written about some of the interesting characters over the years who have either played for the team or supported the team. So, observations of characters in the stands. Definitely.
I remember meeting a Cardiff-based poet from quite a few years ago, Lloyd Robson, who was
I know Lloyd.
He was a mad Cardiff City fan.
Yes, I know. Yes. He had a poem in Red Poets about a Cardiff City striker called Carl Dale.
Ah, yes.
Yeah, so quite a long poem about that. Yeah.
The book Wanting to Belong won the Wales Book of the Year in 1998. Could you tell me a little bit about kind of how winning that award sort of changed you or shaped you as a writer, in the sort of years following?
I think it gave me a lot more confidence to write prose, which I haven't got any now particularly. Although writing life sort of experiences, I'm doing that. But writing a lot more fiction. The fact that I actually could manage to write decent fiction, supposedly, although prizes are, who knows anyway with prizes, basically. I think it's. I think it gave me the confidence to kind of write in different voices, and to take different characters' voices and just immerse myself in those characters.
Okay.
I think that's...
Okay, thank you.
Yeah.
The Three Mullahs are fascinating. Not just kind of fascinating book in itself, but the collaboration aspect of it. Tell me more about how it felt to collaborate with Eric and also the National Poet of Wales.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, Yeah, absolutely fantastic, brilliant. I mean, I don't think I've done anything like that ever before. Just having a work with other writers, and just different. What fascinates me about it, looking at the book as a whole, is our different ways of looking at Cameroon, our different ways of approaching the country, but also feeding off each other. I think that's really important.
Yes.
I mean, Eric's stories made such an impression on me when I first met him, and these fed themselves into my poetry. Just meeting Eric's family and so on. But I mean, in terms of Ivor, it was seeing his fascination for the culture and the language, and this influenced me. So it's just this constant kind of feeding off each other and being inspired by each other, which is great.
Fantastic. Are you working on anything at present?
I'm working on a kind of journal, diary based on what's happening.
Right.
Basically the COVID,
Yes.
but also including lots of poetry.
Yes.
So
Yes.
whether it'll get published, no idea.
Okay.
That's the trouble with writing prose. I think with poetry, it's great because I think, it's going to come out, it's going to be
Yes.
published. But
Yes.
with prose, you just never know. Absolutely, no idea.
Okay. So and to wrap up, who will be kind of your inspirations in terms of poets from past and present?
I think with present, it's more kind of poetry books I like, rather than individual poets.
Okay.
I like Jonathan Edwards' first book very much. Robert Walton, his latest book.
Yes.
He's originally a Cardiff poet, but based in Bristol.
Yes.
I like Liz Berry's book, which draws on the Black Country and it uses dialect. Jackie Kay, very much.
Yes.
In the past, some of the poets I've met, Derek Walcott was a real inspiration. James Berry, who was a black British poet.
Yes.
Multitudes of people,
Yes.
really,
Yes.
too many to mention. Seamus Heaney, massive influence. And of course, I lived in Northern Ireland, so I was there living in Seamus Heaney country and around Lough Neagh, and with a lot of poems are based on that area, so I could really closely identify with Heaney. And then especially Wilfred Owen and the First World War poets.
Yes.
Very moving writer. Really closely identify with his work, especially when I was starting to write about Northern Ireland.
Yes.
In the 70s. I was thinking very much of the First World War poets, but especially Owen and Isaac Rosenberg.
Okay. Thank you ever so much, Mike, for your
Okay.
time. It's been an absolute pleasure meeting you, and
Okay.
I'm still reading through the Three Mullers, but there are particular poems which have kind of really, really moved me, particularly the one which you talked about the other night that was about the killing of the motorists. That
Right, okay, yeah, Death in Douala.
Yes,
Right, okay.
I think that must be a poem which must have moved a lot of people who've read the book.
Okay, right.
So yes.
Okay, thanks.
So thank you ever so much for your time.
Sorry, thanks.